All right. There'll probably be some more come in, but I'm going to go ahead and get us started. I appreciate y'all coming back at 2 o'clock. I know we didn't get much of a break today, but Jeremy traveled from Houston, so this allowed him to get here, and he's got to be in Austin in the morning at another church. So he's making the whirlwind tour. So this allowed him to be here and be able to fit us into his travel schedule so that he could be at that church to start their program. So I think that's what you told me. So, all right. So I appreciate him coming, but I appreciate y'all coming up at 2 o'clock. And I think what we'll do is I'm going to say a quick prayer and get us open and up and running. And then we'll sort of do an interview. So I'm going to introduce Jeremy and go through some questions. I've tried to I know I don't have every question that everyone has in mind, but I've anticipated what I think are some of the major things, and I think we'll cover those. However, when we get to the end of the questions that I've got for the interview, whatever questions you've got, Braden is going to be my microphone man, and he's going to come around. If you got a question, I'm not trying to intimidate you with the microphone, but we have some folks who are out of town, and they're joining us on the live stream. And so I want them to be able to hear the questions. They won't be able to hear them if you don't say them into the microphone. So when we get to that time, if there's still some questions, which there sure may be, if you've got one, feel free. And then we'll just have Braden bring you the microphone, and you can ask the question into the microphone. So microphones work whenever they're close to your mouth, not right on your mouth, and not out here. So I kind of get it real close to my chin, and then it'll be good. So other than that, thank y'all for being here. Let me pray, and then I'll introduce Jeremy. Father, I thank you again for this day, and I thank you first just for a wonderful day that we've had the privilege to worship you. Father, I thank you that as we have spent time in your word today, we've already talked about the fact that you are the King of the kingdom, and we serve you. We serve at your pleasure. We serve for your glory. And Father, everything that we have and everything that we are is yours. So I pray that would frame our discussion as we think about these things. You've called us to be stewards, and we want to be good and faithful stewards. So Father, we also pray for our vision, for our community, that you would continue to open our eyes to the folks that are lost around us. Show us the best avenue as to how to reach out to those folks in this community, not for the sake of First Baptist Church Silverton, but for the kingdom's sake. And I pray that we would just continue to serve you faithfully. Again, we thank you for Jeremy and his willingness to travel here and be with us this evening. I pray that you would just be with us now, guide our discussion, and answer our questions. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so Jeremy, I have to say excuse me for a moment because I realized I started this with a piece of gum in my mouth, which is not good. Awesome. So I'm gonna ask Jeremy a couple of things, but the first time I ever met Jeremy, I was at the Baptist General Convention meeting, and I saw that one of the breakout sessions had information on church campaigns, so capital campaigns. And so I know I've shared this with some of you. I decided, well, we're kind of talking about maybe something like that here at our church, so I'm going to go and listen. The whole time I was in there, we didn't talk about raising money at all. We talked about praying for the community, reaching the community. We talked about one example of a church that they started praying for their prodigals, which is something we've done. And before they even could really get their prayer ministry off the ground, some of those folks were already back in church like the next Sunday. And just testimonies that were like that and shared. And then there were folks in the breakout session just like me whose churches had probably done a campaign or a similar campaign or knew Jeremy. They were talking about their story. So I was really intrigued at that point. And so when we brought Jeremy up here, I kind of did my thing again where I was worried that, man, this is going to be a session where I'm, pitching an idea about, something that could turn into something that I have no joy in doing, trying to raise money for our church. And people would get mad at me. I won't like it. We had the best time in that Wednesday night. Folks came up to me after that and said, we are so glad you brought Jeremy here and we had the chance to meet him. I think that's where we've struggled in trying to communicate that to those of you who weren't here. So that's why I'm really excited for Jeremy to be here today. So, Jeremy, I'll start out by asking you the first question that I put on the list. And actually, I'm going to go through questions 1 and 2 together. So one of the things I wanted Jeremy to do is share his testimony and his background, and then just talk about the story of Church Coach Ministries, because I think those things go well together.
Yeah. Well, thanks very much, first of all, GJ. And I get to look out here and I see a lot of familiar faces that I met last time. It's good to see you guys again. And so what I want to share with you is a little bit about my background. The way I grew up is my dad was a church planter. So what that meant is we would start a church, 2 years later, hire the next pastor in and go start another church. So by the time I was 18, we had started 7 different churches. So it was quite an interesting experience. I had to each time pluck myself out of the community I was in, meet new friends and establish new friendships. 2 years later, pluck myself back out and do it again. And so you would think a lot of people would be like, man, that sounds terrible. But I actually today still have friendships in each one of those pockets. So it was really kind of a special experience for me. But when I went to college, I actually never thought I would go into ministry at all. I actually went to I went to college on a soccer scholarship back when I was thinner and I was able to run. But enjoyed that a lot. And anyway, I got my business degree. And through that process, I ended up going into banking. I became a commercial lender. I ended up running my own mortgage company for 11 years. And God was actually preparing me for the call he had on my life in the banking world and in the banking process. And so in 2007, he put a call on my life to go into ministry. And of all things, I believe the Lord has a sense of humor, because my first call into ministry was to be an executive pastor in a 2-year-old, of all things, a church plant. And so I brought into the church world a lot of things I learned in that business world environment. And the church just, it was a huge time of blessing. I was able to do the 4 skill sets that I currently do with churches now, and at that first church. And so we do an assimilation training with churches. We do a stewardship training. We do build-out design work for churches, and also vision campaigns, which is the primary piece we're talking about today. Well, anyway, that experience went so well, I started having churches call from all over. Can I come help out them and all that kind of stuff all over the place? And so I did that, and by 2015, it became a full-time job. So I started Church Coach Ministries 10 years ago, and we've worked with over 500 churches across the country since. And so God has just been so good. Our philosophy is, and no matter what we're doing with the church, is it's all about prayer, and it's all about loving people into relationship with Jesus Christ. Those are the 2 primary things that we do, whether we're raising funds for a church, whether we're doing assimilation with the church, or even the build-out design. Everything we do in that process is through the eyes of how are we going to connect with people better. And so that's how we got to where we are today.
That thing about prayer, how often do you find, and this isn't one of our questions, but for somebody like me who comes to one of your meetings and an information meeting, how often does it turn into like just a time of testimony about prayer and the power of prayer and people catching a vision for the lost in their community, rather than it is talking about fundraising or anything like that?
Sure. And our approach when we do a vision campaign, we call them a vision campaign for a reason. And the reason is we want it to all be about vision and prayer. See, the Lord gives a vision to a church, or to a leadership of a church, or to a lead pastor of a church, or collectively together. And we want to go through that process of getting in alignment with what Christ is doing, and allow the Lord to speak to each of our hearts individually through that process. So what we do is we go through an intentional 8-week prayer journey as part of the campaign. And it's been astounding to see how the Lord works. I often tell groups of people when I'm meeting with them, through the power of prayer, you can't just decipher and say, most feasibility studies will say, you can raise 1.5 times your annual budget, that kind of thing, maybe 2. But through the power of prayer, We've seen over and over and over and over again God opening up doors and avenues that we have no idea about right now, but the Lord does. And so it's just been powerful experience just to see. And he shared the testimony. I'll just speak to it a little bit. This is a perfect time for it, but at Shady Oaks Baptist Church outside of Dallas there. And we went through the process, and they had 138 prodigal children that had been part of their church. And they decided during the 8-week prayer journey that they were going to pray over those children. The most astounding thing happened. Over 65% of those children either returned to church, called their parents, or came home during the 8 weeks. It was unbelievable. And so there's so many different things that get broken through the power of prayer. Another one, it just hit me right now, I should share with you. But we were doing a campaign for a church. It was actually in Seattle, and a church used to be a large church but shrunk down because there was strife over the years, and they probably lost 80% of their congregation. But they had an issue. It rains a lot in Seattle, and the roof was leaking. Their building was big because they used to be a larger church, so this roof was very expensive to redo. Well, anyway, one of the things we do is we do a 24-hour prayer vigil as part of the campaign. And the reason we do it for 24 hours is because you never know who God's going to wake up. And so it was the middle of the night. It was 3 a.m. in the morning, and 3 women drove into that parking lot that did not attend the church, came in and asked if the pastor was there. Unfortunately, in the middle of the night, the pastor a lot of times gets the graveyard shift, so the pastor was there. And he never told me exactly what they said, but they spoke a word from the Lord to him that answered a prayer he'd been praying over the church for 5 years, and the bondage over the church broke at that moment. And the floodgates opened. That church today is running over 800 people. They were 12. They went down to 200. Now they're over 8. They're healthy. They're thriving. And these 3 women, the story on them is they were part of a prayer team of another church. They didn't even live together. They got woke up individually at around 2:30 in the morning, and the Lord put on their heart to get in their car and drive to this church. They didn't know about the prayer vigil, any of those things. We have seen different things like this happen over and over and over again. The other thing that we've seen healings happen in the middle of the night. When somebody gets woke up and God says to get in there, there's a reason. And we have seen over and over, we've seen situations where marriages have been healed. Like we say with Shady Oaks, children have walked away from the Lord, have returned. It's been dynamic, so very dynamic.
Thanks for letting me break script on that.
Yeah, do what I
So
want.
one of the things that I know, and I've heard different statistics, you may know better, is that pastors who enter into fundraising campaigns with their church are usually on their way out.
Yep.
And it's not because they plan to, it's because things go sour.
Yep.
And the church says, get out of here. The pastor says, I'm out of here. So that is one of the points that I knew ahead of time. And so I've always been hesitant towards this. But one of the questions that I've got here is, how does it benefit a church to go with Church Coach Ministries rather than just say, we can save money if we do this ourselves?
Sure. The number 2 reason a lead pastor leaves a church is running a campaign. We were going through a campaign, and an elder was real skeptical at the beginning. And at the end, he gave me a call, and he was an older gentleman. And he said, I got to tell you something. I've gone through 6 different campaigns in my lifetime. I've been somebody who's been part of a church, somebody in leadership. I've been on pastoral staffs, and I've kind of run the gamut on this. And he said, I got to tell you something. This was so refreshing because it never once felt like we were asking anybody for any money. And that's because through this process, it's all about our relationship with Jesus Christ. And so through the power of prayer, we are just listening for what the Lord puts on our heart and responding out of obedience. It's that simple. And the other aspects of answering your question are, when you work with a campaign consultant company, you are likely to raise about 40% more dollars than you would on your own. we have had at least 20 some campaigns come to us where a church said, hey, we're going to do it on our own. It didn't work out so well. They gave us a call, and we did it the next year and raised over triple of what they were able to raise. The other aspects of kind of what we come to the table with is we are the official partners with the BGCT. So we are the only campaign company out there that they officially partner with. So we have been well vetted all over the place. And the other aspect is we've actually gained a lot of really cool, neat partnerships. One of those is Tithely, which is an online giving platform. And for the churches we work with, they literally cut their online giving fees more than in half for the churches that we work with. And in a campaign environment, when you're trying to raise a decent amount of money, that can be tens of thousands of dollars savings to a church. The other one that we partner with is we partner with, if a church needs to do a playground or something like that, we partner with Playcore, which is a national playground company, and we are able to have access, and I write a letter of recommendation to go along with it, to get the churches that we work with a $100,000 grant towards a playground. And so there's lots of little things like that that we're able to come through with from partnerships that we've established over time and that sort of thing.
So I'll just share this with you. I know most of the congregation knows this, but this is also breaking our script. But I followed a pastor, and I think I was at least number 3 and maybe number 4 after that pastor, who led a church into a large building campaign, put the church into a huge amount of debt, and then as soon as the campaign was finished, as far as not taking care of satisfying the funds, but getting all the building done, that pastor left. The church always felt sidled with, the prospect of, if I had ever pitched the idea of doing some sort of campaign, I would have been run out on a rail. Whereas here, I've come to a church that is a long time past any sort of campaign, other than just from time to time, air conditioners are out, we need to raise funds. Gas leak last week cost $7,000, or send the kids to camp this summer. So I see those dynamics just as a pastor. So I have an understanding why why would be the number 2 reason a pastor leaves. But I also see that, whenever a church can grab onto a vision rather than it be about a campaign, which I always felt like the church in Euless that I served, it was always about a campaign that was centered on an ego who checked out as soon as he had a big building built, and then went down to the next church and said, look what I was able to do over there at that little neighborhood church. They have a huge daycare center and dynamic children's area. Well, everybody left the church after he left, so all that just sat empty for years. So I've seen that, like a program or a campaign can become about a certain person or set of ego. That's why I appreciated hearing your testimony more than once now. I've never felt like it was some sort of pitch to say, hey, hire us and we'll raise you a lot of money. I know that there's part of that, and you've talked about that, but I really appreciate just the understanding that whenever a church begins to seek vision, and it's not about any sort of agenda from me or any pocket within the church, but a church catches the vision for what the Lord can do, it's bigger than anything we would have imagined. So all that to say, I don't have a question in there, but I definitely appreciate you communicating those things, because I think some of us who have been and heard you now more than once, we've struggled as to how to share that idea with the rest of the congregation. Mm-hmm. So now this is number 3 for me in being with you. I think I have a better ability to share that. But
a couple things I kind of want to add on about, kind of what we're about or who's part of us. And so when a church works with us, you actually work with our whole team. We work as a team. So we don't pass you on to the 10th person down the line that'll work with you kind of idea. We actually do it collectively. And one of the reasons we do is when you guys are praying and fasting, we're praying and fasting too. We'll actually take one of the days and pray and fast during the process. And a lot of times God will speak to our hearts I'll call up the lead pastor and say, I feel like I'm hearing this from the Lord. What are you hearing? And we've had some of the most amazing things take place through that process, which I'll share a little bit later, a story about that. But the other aspect is on our team, and I think this is a good part to talk about it, but we do many documentary films for churches. And nobody else out there does this. And God's really built our team uniquely. Not one person on our team did we ever advertise and say, hey, come work for us, come be part of us. It was always God leading them to us. And so it's really interesting and dynamic. Well, the couple that does the videos and the films for us, it's a husband and wife couple. She was an executive producer on over 100 Hollywood films. And he and her have a tremendous life transformational story to Christ. So if you get the opportunity to work with them, I mean, get to know them, it's unbelievable. But he was the number 2 man for the leading atheist in the world, Richard Dawkins. He traveled the world with Richard. And Josh has been on Super Bowl commercials. He has been all over the country giving his testimony. He was radically saved by Christ in the year 2020. He's been working with us full-time now for a couple of years, and he's been on Turning Point, all these different huge conferences, and he's given his testimony about what he used to do to send people to hell. He now gets to do for his glory. But what I want to say about these videos is they've been going viral. And we've had some of our videos raise over $1 million. And money has come in from places nobody in here even knows. We had one that I'll share about with you that went crazy with it. But people were literally getting funds in from a church in Texas here, a small town in Texas. We're getting funds in from New York, California, everywhere, just all over the place, saying we want to support your ministry and what God's doing there. And so we've really found that to be a huge asset and a huge tool that God's using Josh and Maureen's life and what they've gone through and really glorifying their work now from what they used to do to really literally send people to hell doing evolution videos and all these things that Richard stood for. And so it's just been profound to see that take place. And then the other area I want to share is we do an assimilation training with churches. Don't be scared of that word. What I want to talk about with this is what we do is we help a church connect with their community even better. Obviously, this church has great reach into your community. There's no doubt about that. But what we do is we help you do it even better. And there's a lot of components to that. That's really not why we're here tonight. But I just wanted to share that there's a lot of aspects of how we help churches through the process.
So. One of the questions that I had in here was, tell me about like the build-out design aspect of what you do, because one of the things I think, this may or may not affect that one way or another, but it's one of the things that I find unique about where we are. We had somebody here this morning talking about just food need here in the area, and us being in what you call it, a food desert. But we're also in a building desert. It's hard to find contractors and people to come in and even want to come out here to do the kind of work. So tell me about that part, the build-out design.
Sure. So in the build-out design piece, what we do is we take a look at a church facility, but we do it in a unique way. We do it through the eyes of the community. And what does the community experience when they come into the church that we're working with? And when we assess that, what we do is we do a site plan. And in that plan, we work through what are some different things we can do with the property to connect with the community well. We've done gymnasiums, we've done playgrounds, we've done community centers, we've done all kinds of different things in our time. But when we're looking at a church facility, what we want to do is we want to maximize the ministry flow of a facility, and we also want to really pay attention to what I call relationship connecting areas. Where are places within the facility that people can connect, that people can meet during the middle of the week and have Bible studies, or you can host workshops or whatever the case may be. But we're always thinking about how do we maximize a facility for ministry and reaching the community while we're doing it. So it's really unique. It's not as if we sit down and say, okay, how many classrooms do you need? How many of this do you need? How many of that do you need? The other aspect that we really focus on is children. We think it's important to let the community know that children matter to the church we're working with. And so a lot of times what we'll do is we'll actually theme children's areas. This is not an expensive thing to do, but it makes a world of difference to the kids and in their environments and all that. We did a church, and we literally, if anybody's ever been to Disney World or Disneyland, we literally turned their children's area into what it would look like to be in Toontown. And it was just a lot of fun. And we always think through the children's classrooms, and I'll give you an example. At one of the churches, if you were a younger kid, we kind of themed it around like Central Park in New York, just kind of the idea. And so if you were a younger kid, your room was designed and painted and everything like you were in a park. Because if you were a younger kid in Central Park, what you would see is you would see, you know, the nice areas, the greenery, all that, because that's their sight line. The middle-aged kid now, we would have bulldozers come in, and you'd start to see some structures starting to be built and that sort of thing. And as you get to be older, now you're seeing the skyscrapers and everything, but they never changed environments. They just changed their point of view. And so we're always thinking about different things like that, how to be creative. Again, this stuff is not expensive, but letting people know when they walk into an environment how important the children are to the church is just something that we really care about. So that's another aspect.
So I'm looking at our list of questions here. I know some of these you've kind of hit on, like success stories.
I got more.
Yeah, throw a few at me.
I got one I want to share. We had the opportunity to work with First Baptist Church Olney. If you guys know where Olney, Texas is, went through their town. Your town's bigger than their town, I'm pretty sure. Because
we watched their video one Sunday morning.
When we drove through, we literally, I think there's a stop sign or just maybe a flashing light. Well, anyway, God did such a movement there through the power of prayer. It was just extraordinary. I mean, I don't even know if I could describe what happened there. But through that process with First Baptist Church Olney, the video went viral, first of all, and they ended up raising, through some efforts that they did, efforts we did, the video, the whole thing, but the combined total, they ended up raising $6.4 million. It was absolutely astounding. And what I find is that a lot of times we limit the Lord in our mindset. And so we've had many campaigns where the goal has been, here. But God, through the power of prayer, has decided the church actually needs this because their vision is too small. And so we had a church in Southern California. Unbelievable things happened with that project. But one of the things that was unbelievable is through the external part of the campaign where we're connecting with the community and all those sorts of things, a partnership just started to flourish. And it was between the church and the Boys and Girls Club of the community. Well, the church had extra land, and so the church said, you know what, if you guys want to come and build your new gymnasium on our property, we'll gift you that ability to do that, and then as a church, we'll minister to the families that are coming in the Boys and Girls Club. So it's just been astounding to see all the different ways that the Lord's shown up, larger than what maybe we thought. On average, we've now done over 140 campaigns. On average, when a leadership sets an initial goal, we are raising 267% of that goal. It has just, it's been astounding. But it's all done through the power of prayer, all of it.
So this one is not on here, but I've thought about it while we've been here talking. I told you our deacons met and we talked about this. One of the things that was expressed in the deacons meeting, we had the deacons meeting to talk specifically about this. And one of the things that I think is a common theme, it's not just our church, it's a common theme. And I tried to address it just talking even about stewardship this morning, is that the people who make things happen in a church, tend to be a really limited number of people. And that was one of the frustrations that was expressed in our deacons meeting. It's just the same small group of people who work so hard. And I think the idea of a vision campaign seemed daunting. And then the more that we kind of talked about it, and some of us that were in the meeting with you, we kind of felt like we had a vision for something bigger than just kind of dragging people kicking and screaming into doing something they didn't want to do, or feeling like, oh, I've already given to all this. How could I give to anything else? Those kind of things. And I think those things kind of become discouraging to churches where they feel like, oh, this is just going to be the same little group of people. How do you see churches transform through this process?
Wow. That's a great question. We are seeing an activation of the individual that comes to a church. We're seeing true heart transformation taking place. I'm trying to think how to express this, but in this process, I'll go ahead and share this. I developed a 2-session stewardship course. Now, to give you the background of that stewardship course, I think it's important to tell you this story. But when I was in the banking world, I went to a church called the Miracle in the Cornfield. It was a small town in the Midwest, town of 3,000 people. But 5,000 people attended the church on Sunday morning. People just drove in from all over, different communities would come to this church. Well, with my business background, they asked me to teach Financial Peace University, Dave Ramsey's educational piece. And before I say what I'm going to say, I'm a fan of Dave Ramsey. But what I have to say about it is I grew very frustrated. And the reason I grew frustrated, it was 13 weeks long at the time. And people showed up to about half of it, kind of like they go to church. We're supposed to laugh on that one, right, guys? Huh? But anyway, I took a few days and prayed and fasted with the Lord. Do you want me to keep teaching this course or not? And God just really put on my heart, I want you to teach them what I taught you. And to me, that was a no-brainer. Well, when I was a younger man, I went from being a commercial lender into the mortgage world in a time when mortgage rates weren't great. They were even higher than they are today, which is hard to believe. But anyway, I decided to go away for the weekend to visit my roommate from college, and Saturday night rolls around, and he asked me if I want to go to church. Well, at that time in my life, I was a tipper, so if I needed something from the Lord, here's $20, or I needed something real big, here's $50. Come on, God, come through for me, that kind of attitude. And I didn't want to go to church. I didn't feel like going to church. But he kept pestering me and pestering me. About the 7th time he asked, I finally said, all right, I'll go, And I probably said it about like that, But I got to tell you, I had never been to that church before, but it was a divine moment for me. I was on the edge of my seat. I was riveted, and the sermon was on a topic that I hadn't really heard before, and I hadn't really heard much since. And it's centered almost completely around dishonest gain. And I walked out of there committing to be a generous giver. And I also walked out of there being convicted on dishonest gain. And I worked at the bank. Don't worry, I didn't loot money from the bank. What I did, though, is I loved to go golfing. And so I would take a couple clients golfing, but I could never fill up the foursome. And so I would invite a buddy or two in, and I would expense the buddy's lunch and golf to the bank. And God's like, you're done doing that? I'm like, okay. Well, anyway, he just gave me a download, to be honest with you. It only took me about 2 days to put the curriculum together. It just felt like it was straight from the Lord. And what the Lord's done with this has just been astounding. But the first session has to do with what does it mean to be obedient to Christ, not just with our finances, but with our entire life. And if we are obedient to Christ, what types of abundant blessings does he have for our lives? And so I'll save it because I want you guys to experience it. But the life transformation and heart transformation that has come out of this course, I could stand up here all day with stories. I get emails all the time of just life transformation after life transformation. And I think the key to all of this is to remember that this whole piece on obedience really does run through our entire life. Every day we go to work, we connect with people in the community, whatever the case may be, God's speaking to us all the time. The problem is, are we even listening for his voice? And when we do hear his voice, are we obedient to whatever he asks us to do that day? And so what we find through this process is there's an activation that takes place. church after church after church are telling us, hey, when we started this thing, we had 20 people we knew we could go to, and they would lead a ministry, or they would do this, or they would do that. And we're taking that 20% and turning it into like 60, sometimes 70%. And it really does change the dynamic of how much a church can impact the community when people say, you know what? Christ is calling on me to be obedient with my time. And you know what? So far in my life, I haven't been very obedient with my time. So if I'm somebody who hasn't been obedient with my time and I start being obedient with my time, a lot of things happen. A lot of change takes place. So it took me a long time to answer that question, but we got there.
That's good. That's kind of what I was shooting at, is that answer. When we were in that deacons meeting, and that particular deacon isn't here, so I'm going to speak for him, but if y'all think I'm speaking something he didn't say, you shoot it at me. But we were talking about that very issue, because I think the idea of doing something big is daunting, because it feels like the group that's going to be doing it is really small. Mm-hmm. And he said, after we talked about this, and I didn't share that testimony perfectly, but I talked about how you had shared with us in that Wednesday night that this is one of those things that activates the idol membership. I mean, there are people who come, and they may give like their tippers like you're talking about, or they may serve on a committee if we beg them to, and then they may show up for a committee meeting if we get lucky. And really, when it comes down to it, it's just a smaller group of people who get things done. And that deacon said, if this activates the church, it's worth the $25,000 fee to enter into the campaign. And he said, I would spend that today. And is that a fair assessment of exactly what he said? Now, I'm not trying to pitch that as far as, some sales pitch, but for a pastor who, has always been a part of a church that I would say most churches are the same. Now, one thing I've been able to brag about in this church since I've been here is they are faithful. And so every year our budget's around $300,000, $100,000 plus every year goes out to missions. And that may not be included in our budget. Some of it is, some of it's above and beyond. So I've seen this church be faithful, but I still kind of feel the same angst, I think, as any of my fellow pastors. And since Jeremy's been a pastor, I think he can speak to this. I'm just being transparent. The angst that not enough people get involved. They come, and they may show up to a meeting here or there, but the level of involvement that I feel like we're called to, I struggle with. And I don't know how to encourage the church in that, because I can't drag people kicking and screaming to do that. But what I've been encouraged to know is that there's, churches, there are churches. And not that Jeremy himself is the magical way that this happened, but the Lord has used him to transform the membership of some of these churches that he's worked with, so that they can say, we went from a group of about 20% to like 60% of people who show up are excited and active. And by active, I don't mean pew potatoes who just come and sit in a pew on Sunday. I mean literally active. Like Kids in Christ will no longer have to beg for people. So
let me share this real quick. First Baptist Church, Texas City, we started working with them in assimilation, and then we were going to do a campaign. We started working with them in assimilation, and they were about 220 people when we started with them. They had 6 volunteers on their welcome team. So this is kind of the equation you're talking about, where a few people were willing to get involved up front. They had such a connection with their community. The church grew by 177 members in the first 6 months. They had 29 baptisms of the 177, and their welcome team at the end of 6 months was not 6 people. It was 32 people. A lot of the new people said, that affected me so much, that's where I want to serve. And it's a wonderful first step for somebody in service. It's not like working in your children's ministry where, you have to vet them and do background checks and all those sorts of things. So it's just amazing to see. So this is just an example of how we've seen churches transform quickly.
All right, so the last question I have, and I'm going to save this till after we have any other questions, but just what encouragement do you have to share, from your experience for a church like us? But I'm going to have Jeremy answer that last. I want to check and see what questions does anybody have. has one. I can get to Brooke faster than you.
Shocking, I know. Thank you. So I'm just going to ask it because I'm straightforward. The $25,000 fee that keeps coming in and out of conversations, what exactly does that entail? So assimilation training, is that a separate fee? The building out, is that a separate fee? Do we pay $25,000 and then we say, okay, we've done our praying, now we got to pay $10,000 to raise money? Like, I mean, it's just what exactly is it? $25,000 and then it's for how many months?
Yeah.
I mean, I have been asking this question since day one.
Okay, so great question. I'll answer the question. What I want to say first is we're very inexpensive, believe it or not, for a capital campaign company out there. Most campaign companies will charge you $80,000 just to do the campaign alone. I know it sounds like a lot, so I've always had the mentality, and CCM's always had the thought process of we're never going to extort a church. We've now worked with over 500 churches. I've never once had a church call me and say it wasn't worth it, not one. And so here's how the fees are broken down. I'll start with the build-out design. The build-out design is $5,500. And what you get with that is I'll be out here for a day doing the design elements and all that sort of thing, and then we have an architect on our team, and they will develop the floor plan and the site plan, okay? And you'll get AutoCAD drawings and all of that. We get you to a place that with an architectural firm would have cost you $20,000. Easy. And so what we do is we try to get churches to that place so that they don't waste all that back and forth money at $400 an hour with an architect of, no, move this room over here, no, move that over there, whatever those cases. We work out all those kinks. And then we have partners that then can take your project if you need a building permit. If you don't need a building permit, you can just work off of what we have, which was our understanding we talked about. So again, that's the build-out design. The campaign itself is $25,000, and we work with a church about 8 months typically through that time frame to go through that process. And then if you want to do the video, that's an additional $10,000. That will be the best $10,000 you will ever spend as a church. I guarantee you that. We have not had one video not at least raise $100,000. We haven't had that happen yet. So, and then the other aspect is the assimilation. If a church does a vision campaign with us, we typically, for the 4-month assimilation training, we charge $8,000. But if they do a vision campaign with us, we give them a 50% off of that. So we do that 4-month training for $4,000. So that's how those are all broken down. So, yep.
Thank you. What else?
Just one question, and that is the documents that your architects and engineers put together, are they bid ready? Is that something that the church can go right out to the GC public and get bids?
Well, it's a good question. Honestly, what we'd probably need to do that is we would probably have to take it to one of our partners to get it bid ready. It would be close, but not quite, because we're not doing all of the, depending on what's designed, we're not doing the HVAC runs and just some of those different pieces like that. We're basically more into the structural side of things and, how to utilize the entire area. So you're probably going to spend a few more dollars turning it into that, to be honest with you. Yep.
So, like, contractor-wise, y'all would handle all of that? So, like,
we don't. No, we
you
don't. No, we're not the contractor.
Okay.
What we do is we do the design elements. Now, we have partners that can come in and do that aspect, but for the 5,500, you're getting the design elements and the CAD drawings for both the floor plans and site plans. What we do is we partner with a couple different organizations here in Texas that then take what we give them and then they turn that into most people need stamp drawings. My understanding is you don't need stamp drawings, so you would be a lesser level of what you would need to turn that into that. And then they handle all the construction aspect of that. So most companies that do the owner's rep kind of aspect is they're charging a 10% fee on managing the construction project, so to speak. But we don't. I am not a contractor, I promise you. We
yeah,
just
I was just
design.
wondering
Yep.
because we're so far out. Usually we have to
Well, we have a
force people to get out here.
we
I'm
have
not meaning that.
we have a
ugly.
group that does all of Texas. That's actually also an official partner with the BGCT. So there are folks that we know that we can get those items done for sure.
Okay, I'm a little confused. So it's the 25,000 for you. It's 5,000 more for the drawings, and then it's another 10,000 for the video.
That's correct.
Okay, that's just what I wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
So we're really talking about
And the video's optional. You don't
Okay.
have to do the video.
so
No one's-
possible 40,000. Okay.
Yeah, no one's. You don't have to do the video. So. You don't have to do any of it. Yeah.
Would we collect the money? Would we have the money first before we started the project?
That's a GJ answer.
Definitely yes. Just because of what I went through and following that at North Euless, I mean, if the church decided, no, we want to take out a loan, I would tell you you're crazy. I mean, the church could do that, but I would want no part in it. So, yeah, this is going to be one of those things that God opens the door, we step through, because he clearly opened the door.
You said that y'all help, sorry, with the fundraising also. How exactly do y'all help with the fundraising?
So, I don't know if this is it still working? All right, good. What we do is we coach. What we'll do is we'll build a team within your church. You'll work with all 7 of our team, and we'll go through a process where we'll do the training all the way through the process. And then what happens is as we move through it and God starts opening up doors, then, for example, when we do the video, we end up putting on what we call a landing page, and it would have a donate button below it, and then we would send that out not only to people that you maybe all know, but also to people that we've connected with over these last 10 years. And so we've had some of our partners that say, hey, every time you get a video, send it to us. We have a lot of those individuals that give towards these projects, different things like that. And then there's a whole other side of connecting with the community through the campaign piece that we do. There's a lot to it.
I've got a question. So this kind of builds on to what I think Kai was asking as well. So and what I said earlier, we struggle with finding people to do the work in these rural areas, but you've got connections that we would have access to.
100%, yep.
I have a question. If during this fundraising and we get $100,000 from somebody, they donate $100,000, what percent does your company get out of that 100,000? Does all of that 100,000 go to Silverton Baptist Church?
Yep. Good question. We get 0%. We're not taking any percent of any dollar. Ours is a flat fee. That's another thing. A lot of campaign organizations out there, they'll take 5-10% of those dollars. We take 0. So, yeah, none of that would ever come back to us. Yep.
My question is kind of like hers. When do y'all collect? When do you get paid? I mean, how
How's it work?
is that going to work?
So I guess I'll break it down to you. On the build-out design, That kind is handled separately, kind of an upfront one-time payment, because we have to pay our architect that's part of us and all that kind of stuff. The campaign's a little different. The way the campaign works is when you guys agree to move forward, 10% of that fee's due, which is $2,500, and then the remainder will be spread out over. Typically, the church will choose 4 or 6 month time frame.
So it's up to us.
It's a monthly
basically
payment.
then?
Yeah, it's a monthly
Okay.
payment. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Are you guys having fun yet?
I don't know exactly how to ask this, but of all this you've done over time and success, is there something else you could tell us, especially somebody older like me? Some bumps in the road, some bad things that's happened that you can save us going through?
Yeah. You know, to be honest with you, we haven't had any that have like crashed and burned, so to speak. We had one. The interesting story is I kind of told their end result story earlier, but the one that partnered with the Boys and Girls Club, that whole deal, they had somebody who was their executive pastor at their church who was sitting in the campaign director seat, which is one of those roles we kind of put together from the church side of things. And we designed a really nice brochure that goes out launch Sunday, and it's got frequently asked questions in it, all kinds of things, a letter from the past, all that. Well, we put it together. He printed it out, but he neglected to even pass it out to the people in his church. And so, long story short, people really didn't understand what was going on. And so that is the one that I always think of when people ask me that question. And what I'll say about this is I've got good news. Our roles and responsibilities from the church side of things are very light. So the individuals that decide to be part of this, they aren't picking up a part-time job. I assure you of that. We've got it designed in such a way that they're going to put in probably an hour and a half to 2 hours a week worth of work towards the campaign with us. And so it's not going to be daunting or any of those sorts of things. And the biggest thing that we see is when a church simply wants to do it do it a la carte, do it their own way, and they kind of like take of all the things that we do, they say, you know what, I'll do this little sliver of this here, I'll do this little sliver here. Those are the things that just kind of take it off the rails a little bit. And then we have to kind of come in and kind of regroup and all those sorts of things. So it's actually not very difficult.
So this is totally separate from Jeremy, but Bill, you made me think about this too, and just talking about that. How long have we had a designated fund for a church bus? Ephraim was our youth minister when we started it. Do we have a church bus? So my opinion of this is, if I have to manage this, it's probably going to be like the church bus, because I don't want to become the fundraiser. You heard my heart when I just preached about stewardship one time this morning. You know, I feel compelled to do that more often, but if I become the preacher who's always preaching about stewardship and money, I'm not going to like it, and you're not going to like it. And people who come in here and visit, they may be here 1 week, and then 6 weeks later they're here, and they think, this preacher's still preaching about money. And I'll become that one preacher that the person who told me they didn't want to come to church here is because they were worried that preachers always preach about money, and they didn't want me preaching at them about money. So that's my example in this. I think we've kind of got a dichotomy here. We look at what we've done when we've raised funds. When we have emergencies, we do it. When we have kids that go to camp, we do it. When we have a church bus and we all know we need one. Ephraim was our youth minister. Nicole's been here 7 years. I don't know how many years before Ephraim left. So we've had a designated fund for a church bus for at least 7 years. So I'm just using that as an example. Not to pitch Jeremy, but to pitch what it would be like if we decide to undertake this. Unless you're ready to be our campaign manager and you got all these. No, I'm kidding with you, Bill. So I'm really not saying, I don't want anybody to hear me and think, well, GJ's threatening that if we don't do this, and we're never going to do it. I still feel like God's vision is bigger than Jeremy Malik or G.J. Walton.
Yes.
It's bigger than First Baptist Silverton. So I feel like God is already doing something, so I'm not worried about how it gets done. I have the fear that I'm going to be the fundraiser, but I know that God's not going to put me in that position unless he really wants me to be. Sorry.
That's great. Good question. Any more? Because I still have to share the encouragement yet.
You talked about like the time. You talked about like leadership training. Where would that be in the timeline of?
So the first conversation that we would have is I would meet with the leadership or whoever all needed to be part of the conversation, but it would be about the vision. What is the vision of the campaign? And it will boil down to the fact that it needs to marry itself to the vision of the church. Okay, so we're not trying to create a new vision or any of those kinds of things. It's got to connect. But the leadership training then, after we go through a process of praying and fasting together on determining who those leaders are, and God's putting them on GJ's heart, then we come in person, and we would probably meet in the Family Life Center over there, and we would do that training in person. And that's probably going to happen. Fellowship Hall. It's probably going to happen in the first 30 days of us working together, because as we go through this process and, launching the prayer journey with the campaign, all that sort of thing, that stuff would come first. Yep. It would be before the campaign. Oh, yeah, for sure, 100%. Yeah. We had one right here, too.
This may go along with his. I really like the idea of the theme in the children's department, the walls and the decorations and things like that, making it really kid-friendly and fun. Would the people who teach in those classrooms have some input into that?
Sure.
Or would it just be whatever you guys come up with for us?
No.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So, for example, I don't, like, for the theme, I actually want you guys to put a team together and talk through what you want your theme to be. It doesn't matter to me what it is, but once you choose it, I can help you lay it out and allow it to flow well. Yeah. Yeah, we've got all kinds of, exactly. Yep. Yeah, we don't pretend to be your church. Yeah, we want, yeah.
Last chance. Speak now or forever hold your peace. That's true. We're having a business meeting about this in a couple of weeks.
One of the things that concerns me, if you'll look around, there's a lot of gray-haired ladies. And there's a lot of, I'm sitting right behind you, Peggy. We have a lot of little old gray-haired ladies, and sometimes funding it and giving is hard for us because we have one income coming in.
Sure.
And that's it.
Yep.
And it strains our budget sometimes, to give as much as we would like to give.
Sure.
And things we'd like to do.
Sure.
But we have, as my grandson said when he came to join our church, he told his wife, it's a church full of little old ladies. and it is. And for a long time, well, but I'm saying for a long time that's what it was. But in the last few years, we have had a lot of younger people that come into our church,
Sure.
which is a blessing.
Amen.
Certainly a blessing. And I'm right behind her. So, but what I'm wondering about is how are you going to meet the needs of the elderly and the young people? And we want the young people met.
Sure, 100%. See, it's a great question because as it's hard to explain it till you go through the process. But I've got the luxury of being able to watch a lot of these take place, and I see God every time. But guess what? Every time in a different way, and it's been astounding. So what I would say, if I could use the terminology you used, the little gray ladies, you guys can pray, right? Right? And and whatever God puts on your heart, you'll respond to whatever that is. As we join an entire congregation in prayer, an amazing thing starts. You lead me right to what I want to share for encouragement. But God does not give you a vision that you can do on your own. He only gives a vision that only He can do. And the reason is because He wants to show up. Now, He requires something of us. And what He requires of us is getting in alignment with what Christ is doing. And that's through the power of prayer. And in doing that, He always requires two things of us. Always. I've never seen God show up without these two requirements. The two requirements are He requires our obedience. He, for some reason, when we get to heaven, I'm pretty sure the currency is not the U.S. dollar bill. It's obedience. And He requires that obedience of us, and there's another key thing He always requires, and it's the scary thing, okay? It's the scariest part. He requires a faith step. He always requires a faith step. See, in life, forget money, in life, if we are too scared to take that faith step that Christ is asking us to take, then whatever happens. Well, I'll share with you, I haven't shared this much, but when I had my call into ministry, I worked at I had my own mortgage company, and we were involved in, I made a lot of money back in that day when I was a young man. And God's asking me to leave that behind, go into ministry, and all these sorts of things. Well, I got a phone call right before I was going to go into ministry by a headhunter. And they were looking for me by name. They said there was somebody that worked at the old bank you worked at, and they're looking for you by name. They became a president of a certain bank. They want to offer you their vice presidency. I was 28 years old. I was going to make over $500,000 in salary. And I was sitting here with the Lord. I'm like, okay, was I faithful in the little things? Now you're giving me the big things. And so I took time and prayed and fasted, and I went to work one day. I had little kids at the time, but I went to work one day, and I just took my Bible. I had 8 people in the office that normally work for me, but none of them showed up that morning. I mean, it was a divine moment. I knew it. So I stood there in front of my Bible, and I said, Lord, you have to show me. And I opened up to Luke 19, Parable of the Shrewd Manager. And it talks about a man who tries to make his own way in life, always making his own way in life. And so God just put on me, He goes, are you going to follow me or are you going to follow money? What's it going to be? And so I made that decision. I called that headhunter and I said, guess what? I'm not taking the job. She said, do you need a month? Do you need 2 months to think about this? Is it not enough money? I said, I'm not taking the job. I'm going to join a church plant. Now, if I didn't take that faith step to go join that church plant, I would have not had the opportunity to work with over 500 churches and watch who knows how many people got led to Christ through the process and how many life transformational stories happened. But see, it always starts with that faith step. If we can't take the faith step, we're never going to see what God has in store for this property, for this church, for this community. And so, I get passionate about it because it's the way I've learned to live. Like, I walk into situations like these or any other situations, I'm just expecting that the Lord's going to show up. I don't know how, but I just know He is. So I'm not overly concerned about the makeup of your church, because if your church's makeup is we're a praying church, guess what? God's going to show up. I guarantee it. I guarantee it. And so that's my close. Yeah. I'd like to close in prayer when we're done. So I don't know if there's any. Is that okay?
Anybody else? I've got something else, but I'm saving it for the business meeting now. So. But you just made me think of something. So, about that faith step.
All right. Let me close in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we just come to you today, Lord, and just thank you for days like this, Lord, and just the opportunity to get to be with all these wonderful, fine folks, Lord. And we just want to pray a special prayer over the leadership of this church and just give them wisdom and discernment through these processes. They are not easy, even when it comes to choosing what are you going to build here? What are you going to do here? How do you want us to impact the community? But I also want to lift up all the people. I drove through here last time I was here and through some of these various areas where people live and all that. And I just wonder to myself, how many of these people do not know you? How many of these people are lost? Lord, I just want to pray a special anointing upon First Baptist Church Silverton here, Lord, that you would use this church as a beacon and light to draw more and more people to your name. And we give this all to you, holy and precious Jesus. Amen.
Thank y'all so very much. We are dismissed, but thank y'all for being here. So that's an encouragement to me that you were here.